This is a film about how to process green nettles for fibre without the need for retting. We've lived alongside this plant for a long time, and at some point we started to make textiles from it. We don't know where or when this began, but here in the British Isles there are tantalising clues that it may have been as early as 6,000 years ago, during the early Neolithic. I've been trying to understand how our Neolithic ancestors may have accomplished this without the use of metal tools. It's around the beginning of October and we're on the hunt for the remaining last green nettles, because what we're going to try and do is strip off the green nettles and try and get to the fibres working just straight from the green plant, so no retting involved. So the first thing we've got to do is just strip these guys and see what the fibres are like. Okay, what I'm going to do is just separate the fibres out. You can see they're naturally forming into these sort of ribbons. And if I just separate those at the nodes, we can get them into smaller strands. And what I'm going to do now is try and scrape away all the vegetable matter, and we should just be left with the green fibres. There are no textile remains, no looms and no obvious loom weights found from the early Neolithic. However, what has been found are flakes or tools made of knapped flint. I've been working with Peter By Jensen of Southampton University to test out how these flakes perform in the processing of nettle fibres. And the first time you go through, lots of bits start to pull out, but we'll reintroduce those back into the bundle once we've gone through it. At the beginning, you're catching those nodes and just pulling those off, and that takes off quite a lot of the fibres, but what you're left with should be a good bundle of long ones. Right, I'm just going to park those there for a sec and just go back through and just see if there's any long bits that are still usable. I'll just roughly line them up and then just go over it again. These flint flakes started appearing in the early Neolithic, and it's been a bit of a mystery as to what exactly this tool was used for. When they've analysed them under the microscope, they can see a particular wear mark and traces of silica on the flake itself. So it indicates that it was used for some sort of plant processing. And with my experiments thus far, I've just found these flakes to have to be absolutely perfect for the job. I keep my thumb just behind, sort of behind the blade, and it's essentially just being pulled across the serrations. It seems the closer you get it, the whiter the fibres become. They sort of lose their greenness. And what I've ended up with is a very clean fibre. Working from green nettles, you just get far higher percentage of long fibres. What I've got in front of me is the fibres that we've extracted from the about 75 green nettle stems. In terms of spinning it on the drop spindle, all I'm doing at the moment is just wetting the end and then adding twist. And when I start to reach the end, just add in the next bit. And because the fibres still have quite a lot of pectin in them, it's almost like you can slightly glue them together with saliva and then add some twist just to lock that down. And I've been told that that's how the Egyptians were spinning their super fine flax. I mean, it's beyond incredible how fine they were spinning, and it was almost like they were splicing individual fibres to each other. So whether or not simple drop spindles that haven't survived the ravages of time were being used, it just demonstrates how just with this flint flake we've turned fresh nettles into the super fine, even, strong thread. Whilst working on a drop spindle is very effective, it is quite possible to still come up with an equivalent thread using a sort of cordage making system. So I'm basically twisting two singles in one direction and then plying them in the other, adding in bits of fibre as I start to feel them thinning out. And probably not much thicker than twice the thickness of what I'm getting on the drop spindle. That's a really tough thread. It's cutting into my fingers, but I feel it just starting to go. No, I can't do it. Ow. So yeah, basically, even if this was being worked by hand, or maybe even more so by being worked by hand, very, very strong threads can be made. Then at the end of the day, we're able to start to get a sense of what hand processed nettle fabric could look like. And this has been carried around in my pocket for a few weeks and washed, boiled in soda ash, and it's definitely cool and comfortable. And this is a longer piece which hasn't been boiled and beetled and rolled as much, so it's got a slightly rougher quality, but that will end up being a little bag. And you know, I think creating fabric like this with just the most primitive of tools is entirely possible. I'm sometimes asked, why spend the time and effort doing this when clothes can be bought so cheaply? Maybe this is about the value of making something for free, from scratch, with your own hands. Maybe it's about creating something magical or remembering something ancient. I'm convinced these processes are still in our fingers,